It's Wednesday night after a long day, and the last thing you want to do is cook dinner from scratch. But you still want a satisfying, tasty meal without the guilt? Enter your freezer's sidekick, Cauliflower. From thin and crispy cauliflower crust pizzas to all-natural white meat chicken tenders and more, Cauliflower is gluten-free always, satisfies every craving, and is ready in minutes. Cauliflower is available in freezer aisles nationwide. Visit eatcauliflower.com/where-to-buy to find a store near you.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its creators, or sponsors. If you would like to discuss a missing persons case on this podcast, please be sure to visit missingpersonspodcast.net. This episode may contain unsettling or disturbing subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Missing Persons, a podcast dedicated to spreading the word about people who have vanished under mysterious or unexplained circumstances and the family members who are looking for answers. I'm Jess Betancourt.
And I'm Mike Morford. Together we created this podcast to help give a voice to people who continue to look for their missing loved ones. In some cases, even after decades have gone by. In each episode, you'll hear from Jess giving listeners the backstory and the basic facts of the disappearance.
Then Mike will speak with someone who's intimately connected to the missing person, and his guest will share their story with us.
Please stay tuned at the conclusion of this episode to hear about our Patreon program and our commitment to help find people who have gone missing. We'll also share with you where you can find more information and how you can join our team and help our efforts. You'll get recommendations for other podcasts we think you'll enjoy, and more.
So sit back and enjoy this episode, and who knows, maybe you can help us find someone who's missing. Episode 11, Alissa Turney. This episode of Missing Persons will focus on a missing person who is the subject of another long-form podcast about her case. Alissa Turney disappeared on May 17, 2001, at the age of 17. Her younger sister, Sarah Turney, has spent the intervening years since Alissa's disappearance advocating for justice in her sister's case. Her podcast about the case, Voices for Justice, has resulted in thousands of people joining in the hunt for Alissa. Sarah Turney is our guest today. First, let's get into the details of Alissa's disappearance. In May of 2001, Alissa was a 17-year-old high school junior living in Phoenix, Arizona, with her younger sister Sarah and Sarah's father, Michael Roy Turney, who officially adopted Alissa after he married her mother. It was the end of the school year, and the two sisters, who were very close in terms of their relationship, but quite distant in age, had different plans. Alissa was planning on attending a party that night with friends. 12-year-old Sarah was wrapping up her school year with a field trip to a water park. When the busloads of kids returned to Explorer Middle School at the designated time, Sarah's father Michael was not there to pick her up as they had planned. She walked home with friends and left her father a message to pick her up at their house. Sure enough, he arrived there soon after. But Michael seemed worried. He told Sarah he could not reach her sister Alissa. He handed Sarah his cell phone to try calling herself, but there was no answer on Alissa's phone. The two quickly went home and found Alissa's usually neat room in a bit of disarray. Her backpack's contents were spilled out on the floor. Her cell phone, the one that had been fruitlessly ringing, sat on the dresser. And next to it was a note. Its contents were devastating to the middle schooler. It read, "Dad and Sarah, when you dropped me off at school today, I decided I really am going to California. Sarah, you said you really wanted me gone. Now you have it. Dad, I took $300 from you. That's why I saved my money." There is no question about whether Alissa had really written this note. Experts later determined that she did. And while Sarah had never taken her sister entirely seriously about this, she recalled that Alissa had, on occasion, expressed the desire to leave, to live on her own, to be in charge of her own life. She even had an aunt in California whom she had talked about going to live with. Michael Turney is Sarah's biological father. He married Alissa's mother, Barbara Strom, when Alissa was just 3 and her brother John was a little older. Michael had 3 older sons of his own. The couple had Sarah together, and Michael adopted Alissa and John before Barbara died of cancer when Alissa was 8. Initially, when Alissa could not be located, Michael went through all the motions that a normal, distraught parent would go through when their child goes missing. He called her friends, he went to her favorite haunts, he checked in with all the neighbors, and he reported her missing to police that same day around 11 p.m. But because Michael showed the Phoenix PD detectives Alissa's note and told them that she had a drug problem and had previously talked of running off to California, police classified her as a runaway, a typical teen phenomenon, and did not pursue the matter, even though Michael was a former deputy for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office himself. And about a week after Alissa vanished, Michael said he received a call from what appeared to be a payphone in California. He could tell it was Alissa on the other end of the line. All he could make out were the words, "Leave me alone," he said. He made sure that the police knew about this incoming call from California. Sarah does not recall the Phoenix police even visiting the home or interviewing Alissa's friends. Police shrugged off the fact that Alissa didn't bring any of her personal possessions with her when she left and left behind the entire balance of her bank account. As time went on and Alissa was never heard from again, Michael started to voice concerns that something had happened to her. In front of Sarah and her other half-siblings, Michael put on a big show of looking desperately for her sister. He put up flyers and contacted National Missing Persons Group for help. He traveled to California himself to search for her and hand out flyers with her photo on them. At this point, as she was still a young child, Sarah believed that Michael was genuinely concerned about Alissa and her whereabouts. When the girl's mother died when Alissa was just 8, it left Michael alone with 2 little girls to raise on his own, and he lost his job as an electrician after he suffered an injury. At least, that's what he told the kids. He became very strict with Alissa in particular, and the 2 butted heads as she went through a somewhat rebellious phase in her teen years. She was caught smoking pot and on occasion would skip school. Things between her and Michael began to get very tense. Although she was much younger at the time, Sarah noticed that her dad did not treat Alissa the way he treated her, his own daughter. It seems that Michael, while to outsiders seemed a normal, involved, hands-on parent, was actually overbearing, paranoid, and controlling to an excessive degree where his stepdaughter Alissa was concerned. As described by Alissa Turney on her blog, the relationship our father had with Alissa is commonly described by those who knew her as one closer to an abusive boyfriend rather than a fatherly figure. In response to pushback from Alissa about his rules and possessiveness, Michael would randomly search her belongings, listen in on her phone calls, and spy on her with a video recorder when she went out with friends or to her job at Jack in the Box. He was constantly trying to catch her with boys. And while all this certainly seems excessive and unhealthy, it pales in comparison to what police eventually learned about Michael's abusive tactics. Several years after Alissa vanished in 2006, an incarcerated murderer confessed to killing her. His story was determined to have been made up, but in looking into this false lead, police realized that the missing girl, now woman, had still not been heard from since May 17, 2001. The aunt she supposedly mentioned living with had never heard from her. Her bank account balance, with its balance of $1,800 hard-earned dollars, was intact. She had left all her personal possessions behind, and her Social Security number had never been used. In 2008, Phoenix police decided to reopen the case as a missing persons investigation, assigning it to the Missing Persons Unit and declaring that foul play was suspected. Now that they were finally doing some digging, investigators uncovered some worrisome information. For one thing, on the last day she was seen, the last day of the school year, Alissa had been picked up from school early by Michael. He had not told anyone about this. When questioned, Michael told police that he had picked her up to go for lunch, but over the meal, they had had a fight about his rules. When they got back to the house, Alissa went into her room and slammed the door. Michael left to do errands around 1 p.m. When he returned around 5 o'clock, she was gone, leaving only the note. She never turned up for the plans she had for that evening, celebrating the close of the school year at a party with her boyfriend John and some of her friends. So Michael's story was that they had had a fight and Alissa left, but police were very concerned about the fact that Alissa was never heard from again and had seemingly not touched her accounts or gotten a job requiring her Social Security number. Further digging revealed to them Michael's habit of documenting and recording the girls' phone calls. And worse, they learned that Michael had maintained hidden cameras all over his home. Not, he said, to spy on his daughters, but to keep an eye out for intruders. But secret cameras hidden inside vents inside the house set off alarm bells. and Michael sent police clips from his videos of Alissa with boys she had had over to the house, insinuating that one of them could have harmed her. This just showed that he was using the video surveillance to spy on her. Of course, police requested the footage from May 17, 2001, to see what had gone on inside the home. Michael told them he reviewed them and there was nothing to see. When they asked for the audio tapes of that day, he told them that unfortunately, on that day the recorder had been turned off, so nothing was recorded. And there was no recording of the mysterious call from California either. In response to police inquiries, Michael refused to submit to a polygraph exam or further interviews and stopped cooperating with the investigators other than through emails and phone calls. And police started to hear some troubling allegations from people they spoke to who had been close with Alissa. They began to focus more closely on Michael Turney. On December 11, 2008, now college student Sarah was called down to Phoenix PD headquarters. There, police told her that they were in the midst of raiding the home where she lived with Michael. They now considered him a suspect in the Alissa Turney disappearance, and they believed him to have molested her before she vanished. Sure enough, police had obtained a search warrant for the Turney home where Alissa had lived with the family, as well as the house across from it where Michael currently lived. It seemed unlikely that after 7 years there would be any remaining evidence to find, but there was, and it was enough to cement in the minds of many that the unthinkable had happened. Michael Turney had been abusing Alissa and had very likely been responsible for her disappearance. So what did they uncover? Police found letters in which Alissa claimed to have been molested by Michael. Further, contracts were found in which Alissa's signature acknowledged that she had never been abused or sexually assaulted by him. These were not the kind of documents that a teenage girl would create and sign unless someone forced her to. Police delved into the claims in Alissa's letters and discovered that her friends, her boyfriend John, and one of her teachers could verify that Alissa had told them about these allegations. She had told her confidants that her stepfather had gagged her and handcuffed her and had tried to molest her on several occasions. Police discovered that the year before she went missing, Michael had called the Arizona Child Protective Services Department and informed them that if she ever filed a complaint against him alleging molestation or abuse, she was lying in order to get him to buy her a new car. Police also found hundreds of hours of audio and videotape recordings of Alissa dating back to the 1980s, but suspiciously, all recordings from May 17, 2001 were missing. And they found bondage-related pornographic videos, as well as a disturbing film in which a woman was abducted, bound, and killed. As if all this weren't bad enough, there was more. It turned out that Michael Turney was a more sick and deranged individual than anyone had suspected. In the course of the search of his home, police found a 98-page document titled Diary of a Madman Martyr. In this diary, Michael accused the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers of being responsible for Alissa's abduction and murder. This was in retaliation against him for complaints he had filed regarding workplace conditions back in the 1980s when he had worked as an electrician. Michael had informed police looking into Alissa's disappearance that he believes she had been kidnapped by Electrical Workers Union as payback for a grudge they held against him. We won't dignify this manifesto by summarizing it. We will just say that, as far as it relates to Alissa, Michael wrote that 2 union-sponsored assassins had killed her and buried her in Desert Center, California. In turn, Michael had killed off these men, he claimed, although that turned out not to be true. To exact further revenge against the Union at large, Michael wrote that he planned to blow up the Union Hall by driving an explosive-laden van into the building, then shooting any survivors who ran out the front door. Then he planned to go out with a bang and kill himself. Now, all this sounds like the rantings of an unhinged revenge fantasist, but the terrifying part was it seemed that Michael was actually about to make good on the plans in his manifesto. In his home, police found the largest weapons stockpile in the history of the Phoenix Police Department. After evacuating more than 100 neighbors, police confiscated 19 high-caliber assault rifles, 2 handmade silencers, a van filled with gasoline cans, and 26 homemade explosive devices, known as pipe bombs, filled with gunpowder and roofing nails. Needless to say, Michael was immediately placed under arrest. On his person were found 2 handguns, a recording device, 7 magazines of ammunition, and a knife. The police believed that they foiled Michael's plans just in the nick of time. They found the weapons and explosives on December 11th, and the next meeting at the Union Hall was scheduled for December 15th. Michael Turney ended up pleading guilty to possession of unregistered weapons in March 2010. After firing his defense lawyer and representing himself, he was sentenced to the maximum possible federal prison term of 10 years. He was also declared to have paranoid personality disorder and was required to participate in mental health treatments during his incarceration. At first, Sarah didn't want to believe any of the things that police and other authorities were telling her about her father. But after hearing all the evidence police had found, including that they believed Alissa had been forced to write her runaway note, she eventually came to realize that he likely was responsible for killing her sister. Police assured Sarah that they would pursue Alissa's case against Michael after he got out of prison on the weapons charges. But after Michael was released in 2017, to Sarah's disappointment, the Phoenix PD said that they still did not have enough evidence to press charges against Michael for murdering Alissa. Unfortunately, the failure of police to investigate the case as a missing persons case, rather than a runaway from the outset, meant that much evidence had been destroyed over the years. They suggested to Sarah that if she wanted to stir the pot, her best recourse was to harness the power of the media. So she reached out to local and national news outlets, started a Facebook page and a blog, both named Justice for Alissa, and created a TikTok, which has become very popular. She also participated in several podcasts, including one called Missing Alissa, hosted by freelance writer Otavia Zappala, before starting her own, Voices for Justice. In October of 2017, Sarah actually met with her father in person. "We met at a neutral place, Starbucks," she told Dateline. "We spoke for over an hour. But after he realized I wasn't there to reconnect, he got angry. But after I pushed him for answers about Alissa, he finally told me that he would give me all the honest answers on his deathbed. He said, 'Be at the deathbed, Sarah, and I will give you all the honest answers you want to hear.' He also said he would confess to everything if the state agreed to give him a lethal injection within 10 days. But when Sarah confronted him on the phone for her podcast's premiere episode, her father just said, 'There's nothing to confess because nothing happened.'" On February 22, 2019, 9 years after Alissa vanished, the case was formally submitted to the county attorney requesting homicide charges against Michael Roy Turney. Phoenix PD Sergeant Maggie Cox told Dateline that Michael remains the only person of interest in Alissa's case. Over the next year, the Phoenix Police Department worked with the prosecutor's office to provide them with all the evidence they had compiled in the case. Now, the case rests in the hands of the prosecuting attorney. When she vanished 19 years ago, Alissa Turney was 17 years old. She was 5'4" and weighed between 130 and 145 pounds. She had blondish brown long hair and brown eyes. She has a half-inch scar on her chin and pierced ears. She remains a missing person. Mike Morford sat down with Sarah Turney, Alissa's sister, who has been such a powerful advocate on her sister's case. That conversation is coming up after a word from our sponsors. Is there something that interferes with your happiness? Is something preventing you from achieving your goals? I think there are times that we can all use someone to confide in. I know I've had times like that. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, then BetterHelp Online Counseling just might be the right solution for you. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can connect in a safe and private online environment. It's so convenient. You can start communicating with a counselor in under 24 hours. This isn't self-help, it is professional counseling. Send a message to your counselor anytime. You'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, all without ever having to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room. And BetterHelp can assist you with so many things from depression, stress and anxiety, to family conflicts, sleep issues, and more. Anything you share is confidential. And while BetterHelp is not a crisis line, it is convenient, professional, and affordable. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they are recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states. I want you to start living a happier life today. As a listener of Missing Persons, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting betterhelp.com/MP. Join over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health. Again, go to betterhelp.com/MP to save 10% on your first month of BetterHelp.
It's Wednesday night after a long day, and the last thing you want to do is cook dinner from scratch. But you still want a satisfying, tasty meal without the guilt? Enter your freezer's sidekick, Cauliflower. From thin and crispy cauliflower crust pizzas to all-natural white meat chicken tenders and crowd-pleasing snacks, Cauliflower satisfies every craving. Power's products are your favorite comfort foods, but made better for you and gluten-free always. The best part? You don't have to sacrifice taste or time, so you can honor your cravings without compromising. Craving pizza? You can enjoy Power's delicious margarita pizza for only 370 calories for half the pizza. Looking for easy snacks that kids and adults alike will love? Power's baked, never-fried pizza snacks are nostalgia reimagined and ready in 5 minutes. Power's products are available in freezer aisles nationwide. Visit eatcauliflower.com/where-to-buy to find a store near you.
Let's be honest. Most of us have a love-hate relationship with wired bras. We love the lift, but hate the digging. We love the support, but hate feeling trapped. Well, Knix just changed everything with FreeFlex, a wired bra actually designed to work with your body, not against it. FreeFlex features a revolutionary flexible wire that moves when you move, bends when you bend, and keeps everything exactly where you want it. No poking, no stabbing, no constant readjusting, just freedom to move. It also has a demi-cup shape for a natural lift with a lower neckline that flatters in everything from V-necks to dresses. And because it's from Knix, it's available in sizes for every body. Experience the first wired bra you'll actually want to wear all day. Visit Knix.com for 15% off your order with FreeFlex15. That's KNIX.com, code FreeFlex15 for 15% off. Knix.com.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for coming on Missing Persons to discuss your sister Alyssa's case with us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Just a quick introduction. Sarah's been an invaluable asset in finding out the truth about what happened to Alissa. You've been an outstanding advocate for the case. You now host a wonderful podcast called Voices for Justice. You've been heavily involved in the search, and I guess it would be fair to say that you haven't been afraid to ruffle some feathers along the way.
Yeah, that's a really nice way to put it. The police have directly told me that I'm ruffling feathers. So, yeah, I'm doing what I have to do.
And I think I talk to a lot of people that are their own family members' advocate, and are you ever going to have a stronger advocate than someone that's a loved one in these kind of cases? And I think you've proven that there's no doubt that a loved one, a sibling, a parent is always going to be the best advocate in this kind of case.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. I don't think it's fair to really expect anyone else to care as much as someone that was close to the person that is, missing or murdered or needs justice.
And I think your sister's case has received a lot of attention, thankfully. I'm sure many of the listeners that are going to hear this podcast are already familiar with it, but for those who aren't, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle in your sister's case. And I think it's fair to say that many of the clues point to a surprising suspect. But before we break all that down and get into that, can you tell us a little bit about Alissa and what kind of person she was, what she was like?
Yeah. So Alissa was my older sister, of course. She's 4 years older than me. So, I thought she was mean, if I'm being totally honest. I thought that she picked on me way too much. But looking back, it's totally a different reflection. She was really, really sweet. She was definitely that girl who was listening to Marilyn Manson and Eminem, but would cuddle up with her Blue's Clues blanket at the end of the night. And, no matter how much we fought, at the end of the day, she was always there for me. And she was really, she had a lot of responsibility. Our mother died when we were very young, which meant it put her in this position of being a mother figure to me. It made her, do laundry and dishes and so many things that she did at a young age that I really took for granted. I had no idea what was going on in her life, but she was amazing. She took care of the house, she took care of me, and she managed to raise me to be very, very strong, but compassionate. That was always the best part about Alissa. She taught me that you don't just bully people, and if people are being bullied, you go figure out what's wrong with that person. You show them compassion, and just so much love. But at the same time, if somebody is not being kind, you don't have to put up with that either. It was this really cool blend of, like I said, just kind of strength and sweetness.
So it sounds like she had a lot on her plate. She wasn't just living a normal teenager's life. She had a lot of things she had to do as well around the house and helping to take care of you and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, you don't really see that as a kid, right? But when I got older, I realized that she's how all of that happened. It was me, Alyssa, and our father growing up for most of my childhood. And our father just, he wasn't great at housekeeping or making sure that I was well dressed or all those things, that I guess taking care of your children, to put it, frankly. And Alyssa picked up all of those duties. Everything I know how to cook is because of Alyssa. And I have the best memories of me trying to do the dishes and her pushing me aside and saying, "No, I'm not doing them good enough." And she did absolutely everything. I mean, she would even cut my hair. She was just a great motherly figure.
How old were you both when your mom died?
So I was 4 and Alyssa was 8.
And over the years, was there any kind of change in your father? Did he change noticeably? And when I say noticeably, I'm talking like back then as a kid. Could you see things changing in him or his behavior?
So we have 4 older brothers as well. And they say that when our mother died when I was 4, that's when he really broke and changed. You can actually see it in our home videos too. Because if you ask my brothers, back in the 1970s and the early 80s, they would say that he was a great father. He was Superman. He would do all the things I just said Alyssa would do. But he worked on top of that, work all day, come home, take care of the kids, clean the house, the whole thing, Little League, everything in between. And after our mother died, apparently he changed very much, but that's really the only father I ever knew.
So you were very young. Obviously, Alyssa was older. Is it fair to say that you, at that age, I think you just probably said it well, but you just didn't know anything different as far as you can remember? The current father that you have is the one you've always had.
Yeah, exactly. He was always that guy to me, always the man that, would just take me for fast food instead of making a meal. Not that that makes you a terrible parent, but there's so many things that are compounded in this. It's as if he really checked out after all of that. And there were many instances when Alyssa and I were growing up in which he said that he was going to give us away, that he didn't want to be a father anymore. And he also said all the time that he was going to run away because he didn't want to be a father anymore. So yeah, it's all I knew. And that really made me cling to him more. It made me so attached to him, to the point where I went to school maybe 2 to 3 days a week growing up because I was so afraid he was going to leave us that I would literally watch him all day.
Well, it's got to be a tough way as a child you're trying to live your normal life like the rest of your friends and everything, and you've got these issues that you've got to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a lot harder for me to see it then. When you're 8 and 12 and whatnot, you don't see it that way. I didn't realize that's what I was doing. And my father enabled me. He would come in my room each morning and say, "Do you want to go to school today?" And what does any kid say? Like, no, no thanks. I'd rather stay home all day and hang out with you while we go to the dollar movie theater and you take me to get a Slurpee and we go and we get a scratcher ticket and I could win $5 or whatever. It didn't seem like neglect as much as it does now looking back on it. It really just seemed like my normal. And I thought my father loved me more than anything on this planet, even though he would say those things about leaving. I just always thought that he was really sad about our mother, and that's why he said them. So yeah, it was hard to see as a kid. I don't think I realized. I think it was just my normal.
Was there a time when he started treating you and Alyssa differently, and was that noticeable at the time?
Yeah, I mean, ever since I could remember, we were treated extremely differently. Like, Alyssa didn't have an option about going to school. She went every single day. He would make sure that she did her homework every night. He would help her with her homework every night, and I wasn't held to that same standard. She was not able to really stay the night at friends' houses a lot or go out. And I literally would run the streets, Not that I was going far. I had, friends that lived a few blocks away or whatever, but I would just leave the house and not tell anybody and be able to come back whenever I want. And she didn't have that freedom. She again, being 4 years older, still had to very much, check in with him. And he watched everything she did, and it just was not that way with me.
Did she ever did she ever resent that or have any kind of friction with your father over any of that stuff?
Absolutely, especially as she got older. That's really all I remember is them yelling at each other. As, like I said, as she got older, I really just kind of blacked it out, if you will. I'd go in my room and just watch TV and try to ignore it. But they would just yell at each other constantly. And it's not as if she just sat there and took it. She would yell back and they would call each other names. And they fought all the time. But my dad would tell me Alyssa's out of control. She, smoked marijuana and she tried beer or whatever. And growing up in the 90s, when you watch all these sitcoms and, like Saved by the Bell, you think that those things really are after school special, really intense issues. So when I, see that my sister smoked a joint, I think that is heavy drug use, and I think that she's extremely out of control. So that's what I saw as a child. So when they fought, I was like, oh, Alyssa's just being out of control again. I didn't really realize that what she was doing is pretty typical teen behavior that didn't warrant such controlling behavior, and him being just so overbearing with her and so demeaning.
It sounds like he was almost trying to get you in his corner to be on his side.
I would agree with that. Yeah. I think that I was extremely manipulated. I believe, it was set up in such a way that if anyone were to come into the house and ask me and Alissa what our lives were like, and I mean Child Protective Services, because they were in our lives several times, they would come in and I would say, my dad's great. He's amazing. He gives me everything I want. And Alissa would say, he's mean and he doesn't let me do things. And it would just seem, so typical to anyone from the outside.
If you would, take us back to 2001 to May. School was ending for you. It's supposed to be the start of summer and a fun time for you. Instead, that's the time when your sister went missing. Do you remember that day clearly and how it unfolded for you?
I do, yeah. I don't know the exact times. I think that is the fuzziest thing, just because I wasn't interviewed until so many years later. But yeah, essentially, from my point of view, or do you want the full day with my father's side?
I guess maybe explain it like in your words and then maybe versus how your father remembers the day according to his statements.
Sure. So for me, I was at a water park all day. It was the last day of 7th grade. We had a field trip, so it was a day I attended school, which, like I said, was kind of a rare occasion for me. So I was excited. We were going to a water park. I took a ton of pictures. I had a brand new swimsuit I was very excited about. It was polka dots. I got it from the Delia's catalog. I remember because I was so excited. And essentially, the buses get back to the school and my father's not there, which wasn't super strange. Like I said, I kind of ran the streets. So I walked home with my two friends. It was a set of sisters, and I walked with them just like I normally did. And we went back to their house. Their father was sleeping. He was getting ready to go the night shift at work, and we were smoking cigarettes because, not that 12-year-olds should do that, but that's what I was doing at 12 years old. And I was getting ready for my father to pick me up. We sprayed each other with perfume because, that is a solid way to get out of smoking cigarettes when you're 12 years old. And I remember being scared that my dad was picking me up because I thought I smelled like cigarettes and I thought I was going to be in trouble. So when I got into his truck, that's what I was thinking about. But he turned to me and he said, your sister's not answering her phone. Will you try to call her? And he hands me his cell phone. At this time, only he and Alissa had cell phones. So he handed me his cell phone. I tried to call Alissa. I don't remember if it was her cell phone or the landline or if I left a message, but I know that I make a few calls. And we get to the home about 10 to 15 minutes later. And I don't know who entered the house first, but I entered her room first. And, it's a small room. In Arizona, we have pretty small bedrooms. So you walk in, and essentially right where you're walking is what looks like the contents of her backpack, all dumped on the ground. So there's papers and pens and whatnot. And then to the right is her bed, and to the left is a dresser. And I find on her dresser, I find her cell phone, as well as a supposed runaway note that read something to the effect of, "Dad and Sarah, when you dropped me off at school today, I decided I really am going to California. Sarah, you wanted me gone. Now you have it. That's why I saved my money. Dad, I took $300 from you, Alissa." And then my father immediately panicked. He started calling friends and family and saying that Alissa could be in grave danger. Do you know where she is? I'm really concerned, all those things. And then at about 10 p.m. that night, he calls and reports her missing and says, essentially, "My 17-year-old daughter who smokes marijuana is angry at me and left to her aunt's house in California."
So he's already painting a picture for police, it sounds like.
Right, absolutely. And I didn't realize that she was reported that way until, so many years later, just to be fair. But that's how the police report reads.
Were you yourself concerned? Was it like her to go off? Had she done anything like that before?
I was not concerned, and neither were my brothers, but she had not really gone off like that before. But we just figured that she was mad at our dad and that maybe she went to a friend's house for the night. I don't think any of us really thought worst case scenario, especially, I'm 12 at this point. So I'm just thinking she's mad, she'll come back. But no, I did not panic at all.
When the police did get involved, do you remember them coming out, talking to your father, any of that stuff?
So they didn't do that until 7 years later in 2008.
Well, that's already an issue. What was the reason for that, or what was when you finally found out the truth about that? Why was that?
They said that it was because she was reported as a runaway, so they didn't look into it further.
That's like an archaic, old way of thinking. They hear runaway and they just don't bother to look. It sounds like something in the modern era you wouldn't hear. Because it happened, I guess, in the 60s and 70s and stuff like that. Did your dad act alarmed that they weren't looking for her?
Yeah, so by all outward appearances, it looked like he was the only person searching for her. He immediately had me hop on the computer and make a flyer, and then he had them everywhere he went. He said that he put them up on lampposts and that the police told him that he couldn't. I cannot verify that story. I don't know if it's true or not. But yeah, it appeared that he was. He also made several trips to California that summer to, supposedly look for Alissa.
So on the surface, it sounds like he was a caring father that was really worried about your sister, and he was doing his best to try and find her.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely what I thought.
When did something change that maybe cast some doubt on that whole persona?
So basically, the big break in this case was in 2006 when a gentleman named Thomas Heimer confessed to killing Alissa. This man was in prison, still is in prison for life, for murdering a woman named Sandra Goodman. They essentially found him driving her car, caught him red-handed, found her body in the motel room. Very sad story, but he was in prison serving life, and he wrote a detective a letter and said, "I'm going to make you famous. I'm a serial killer." And he confessed to killing 22 women, including J.C. Lee Dugard, who was, of course, found alive and well later on. But what this did was actually make the police look into this case and ask questions. The FBI got involved, and then, again, come around 2008, 2 detectives from the Phoenix Police Department are assigned to this case, and they really start looking into it. And then everything kind of fell apart. We learned the real story, or I guess, my father's version of events of what happened that day. We learned he took her out of school early, and he didn't tell anybody that. We learned a lot when they started looking into it, and, pretty much all roads led to our father.
Up until that point, had you stood by him and been in his corner and trusted what he was saying and doing were the truth?
Absolutely. Even for years after that, I did.
When did it change for you? When did you decide that I need to maybe look at this from a different light and things started to click for you that maybe that wasn't true?
It's Wednesday night after a long day, and the last thing you want to do is cook dinner from scratch. but you still want a satisfying tasty meal without the guilt? Enter your freezer's sidekick, Cauliflower. From thin and crispy cauliflower crust pizzas to all-natural white meat chicken tenders and crowd-pleasing snacks, Cauliflower satisfies every craving. Cauliflower's products are your favorite comfort foods, but made better for you and gluten-free always. The best part? You don't have to sacrifice taste or time, so you can honor your cravings without compromising. Craving pizza? You can enjoy Cauliflower's delicious margarita pizza for only 370 calories for half the pizza. Looking for easy snacks that kids and adults alike will love? Cauliflower's baked, never-fried pizza snacks are nostalgia reimagined and ready in 5 minutes. Cauliflower's products are available in freezer aisles nationwide. Visit eatcauliflower.com/where-to-buy to find a store near you.
Let's be honest. Most of us have a love-hate relationship with wired bras. We love the lift, but hate the digging. We love the support, but hate feeling trapped. Well, Knix just changed everything with FreeFlex, a wired bra actually designed to work with your body, not against it. FreeFlex features a revolutionary flexible wire that moves when you move, bends when you bend, and keeps everything exactly where you want it. No poking, no stabbing, no constant readjusting, just freedom to move. It also has a demi-cup shape for a natural lift with a lower neckline that flatters in everything from V-necks to dresses. And because it's from Knix, it's available in sizes for every body. Experience the first wired bra you'll actually want to wear all day. Visit Knix.com for 15% off your order with FreeFlex15. That's KNIX.com, code FreeFlex15 for 15% off. Knix.com.
It took a long time. Like, I'm not going to lie, it took way too long. It was probably in 2014, 2015 about that things just weren't adding up. At this point, he's in prison, which we can talk about all of that. But, him being in prison and me acting as basically his legal secretary really, put my father in a different light for me. And there were a few things that happened that really just pointed to him not caring about me or his children, which just made me, I think just more open to the idea. And then things just started clicking. I rewatched, there's an episode of ABC 2020 from 2009 where I'm on there defending my father. But all roads lead to him in the episode, and I was really upset about it. But, I go back and I kind of reanalyze this video, and I start talking to my friends, and I remember turning to my boyfriend at the time. We were together for 10 years. He literally lived with me and my father when he was a teenager. And I said, do you think my dad could have done this? And he said, Sarah, everyone thinks your dad did this. Come to find out that I was the last of his children to believe that he did this. When I went to my brothers, they were all like, yeah, we've believed this for a long time.
Wow. So that must have been a real wake-up call, a real life-changing moment for you to say, oh, my God, I think he may have been responsible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tried to confront him. Again, he's still in prison, so we're talking on the phone. I know it's being recorded, so I don't expect to get much. But, he just avoids it. He never says, of course not. How could you think that? He just kind of like changes the subject and acts really weird. And, so when I put all these pieces together, I go to the police and to these two detectives. I'm like, I see what you see. How can I help? Like, I'm seeing the light now. And that's really when we started, partnering, and they sent me a ton of information and kept asking me questions, and I kept asking them questions. And, then they said, when your father gets out of prison, we're going to arrest him then. That way he cannot combine sentences and serve a lesser sentence. So I thought everything was good to go.
And his prison sentence is a story in its own, I guess, in its own right. Can you tell us a little bit about the circumstances behind him going to prison?
Yeah. So when the police started focusing on my father, he didn't cooperate. They asked him for a formal interview. He declined multiple times. They asked him to do a polygraph test. He declined multiple times. there was a lot of surveillance on our home at the time Alissa went missing. There was a hidden camera inside of our living room vent. People report that there were other possible hidden cameras in Alissa's room, in the bathroom, all sorts of places. There were also exterior cameras, and there was no footage from the day Alissa was gone. And he told multiple stories about why there was no footage. And in addition to that, our father claimed that she called a week after she was gone. And our father had a passive recording system on our home phone that recorded every phone call coming in and going out for like over 30 years, since before I was born. And that call was also, not there. He didn't provide it to police. So the police want this footage. They want the video footage. They want the audio of the phone call. They want him to interview. They want him to give DNA. They want him to do a polygraph test, all the things you ask parents of missing children. And he refused. So they got a search warrant and came. Essentially, at this time, I was the point person on my sister's case. I have been since I was 17 years old, so like 13 years now or whatever. And so they said, come down to the station. We have some news about your sister. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I'm in college, so I'm like, will I be back in time for my Spanish test? And they're like, no problem. Come on down to the station. And I get there, and it's 40 minutes of them basically telling me that all roads lead to my father, that, he was sexually abusing Alissa, that I have a sister I don't know about, that he probably killed Alissa, that he, kept us away from our family because he was a bad man. It really just shattered my entire world right then and there, which I am somewhat grateful for. They were telling me the truth. I cannot blame them for that. But it was really hard. And essentially, they are raiding the house at this time. I go back and gather a few things. I gather my dogs. I go back to my brother's house that night, and we're looking on the news, and they found 26 pipe bombs and 19 high-caliber assault rifles. And it becomes the largest bomb bust in Phoenix history. And they also find a 96-page manifesto titled The Diary of a Madman Martyr, and it's his story about how he's going to use these bombs in a terrorist attack against a electrical union that he used to be a part of, because he says this electrical union sent 2 assassins to kill Alissa, and that he found those assassins and he killed those assassins, and now he was going to go blow up the IBEW building to get further revenge.
Well, that's very, very disturbing. How did they first learn about all of this stuff that he was doing? Were they tipped off earlier? Or how did that come about?
Do you mean with the bombs, or
what originally was it? Just in relation to Alissa's case, they were searching the house, or did they have some kind of intelligence that he was doing all this other stuff, and that's why they were searching the house?
Yeah, so I mean, the search warrant is to get evidence about Alissa. There has been some rumors about, people tipping him off, but I don't know if that's true. I can't state whether or not that is true. But according to the search warrant, they were just going in there to get all this evidence to, pertaining to Alissa's story. And I lean with nobody tipping them off because I was allowed to go into the home before they found the bombs. So if they really thought there were bombs in there, I don't think that I would be in there with like 2 regular officers as opposed to the entire bomb squad.
That's a lot to unpack. So I can only imagine for you how tough it was to process all that stuff. When he was arrested for all these bombs and that kind of stuff, did he give any explanation? Did he admit that it was all his stuff and he was going to do all this stuff that was in this manifesto?
So that, like everything in this story, is also a sordid story. So he went to trial for this. He ended up firing his public defender, defending himself because his claim was that the police planted the bombs in his house. But he did end up ultimately pleading guilty.
So let me ask you too, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but do you think, and maybe I don't know if there's been any professional opinions given, but do you think that your father was mentally ill or extremely paranoid, or what do you think was going on there?
Yeah, I think both of those things. And he was on disability since I was very, very young for his mental illness. He lied to me and said it was for his leg, which is what I always thought growing up, which is so silly because part of the stipulation of him getting his disability was that he had to go to multiple psychiatry sessions per week. So I never put two and two together. But yeah, essentially he was, and he had pretty much court mandated psychiatry sessions because of it. But I don't think that he's criminally insane or anything to that extent. He had good days and he had bad days. You know, he was extremely high functioning. He was pretty fit. So yeah, it's hard to say. Also because, you know, it was pretty well known. The police stated in their papers, our father has said it himself, that he manipulated his psychiatrist. He was extremely close to his first one, to the point where this psychiatrist called me and Alissa in and said, you're being mean to your father and it's hurting his feelings. You need to be nicer. Just like, you know, some very inappropriate things. And his second psychiatrist, he admitted that he had some type of agreement in which he would give her extra pills. All of this to say, I don't think he ever got the proper care he was supposed to underneath that plan.
Wow. And back for a second to the home surveillance that your father had, the phone recordings, the cameras and stuff. At the time when you were kids, did you know about that stuff? Did you know he had all that stuff in place?
So I knew that there were exterior cameras. I knew that there was a recording system on the phone because you could hear it every time you picked up the landline. And you would also know just like turn it off if you were having, you know, a risque conversation with your friends or whatever, because this is before cell phones, right? So yeah, we were aware of it. It was a big tape recorder right underneath the phone. And like I said, of course I saw the exterior cameras, and I did eventually find out about the camera in the vent. My father showed me a picture of Alissa, or a video of Alissa making out with some guy on the couch, and her getting in a fight with her boyfriend. And you can see that it's clearly from the point of view from the vent, you can see the slats. So yeah, I was aware. And the thing is, like, after Alissa went missing, I went to him and I said, hey, can you take down that hidden camera in the vent since it was for Alissa? And he did. And he even went as far as to go to Radio Shack and buy me, it was called a camera detector, where basically you press a button, and I forget exactly how it works, but it indicates somehow if there's some type of hidden camera on you. So yeah, it was pretty extensive, and pretty much went right away when Alissa was gone.
And what was his explanation for having all that stuff? Did he offer up an explanation at the time?
Yeah, he said that he needed to watch Alissa.
Wow. So it was, the focus was definitely on Alissa, more so than you.
Oh, for sure. And I'm sorry, I mean in terms of the hidden camera in the vent. You know, the audio system on the phone, he says, is because of lawsuits and because people lie. And the exterior cameras were for, you know, safety like anyone else, is what he said. But yeah, just specifically that one camera. But yeah, I mean, it was all focused on Alissa. He didn't watch over me at all. You know, when Alissa was 17, she was barely allowed to date or go to prom. And when I was 17, my boyfriend moved in with us. My dad bought me a mini fridge and filled it with beer.
Well, so a completely different treatment of you versus your sister.
Yeah, I mean, night and day.
And did you ever figure out a reason why, or do you have an opinion as to why he treated you both so differently?
I mean, I think love is a factor, as hard as that is for me to say. I think that, you know, in his weird own way, he loved me more than Alissa. Because with Alissa, I felt like he treated her very much like a girlfriend or some type of spiteful ex-girlfriend. You know, when the police went and interviewed people, multiple people say that. For instance, just what comes to my mind is the police went to one of her old high schools, and they said, do you remember Alissa Turney? And they say, yeah, a little, but we mostly remember her father, because he would always come in here asking if she was, you know, seeing boys or talking to boys and which boys they were. And it seemed really creepy, like a domineering ex-boyfriend. When I talked to my father in 2017, he was still talking badly about Alyssa's boyfriend's truck. You're talking about a 16, 17-year-old's probably first vehicle, and 15 years later, he's still putting him down. And just everything about the way my father talks about Alissa is just so much like you'd hear some type of spiteful person talking about their ex-partner, just really mean and cruel, and not the way that you speak about your missing daughter.
So you mentioned earlier, you start to change your opinion. You start realizing that all signs are pointing to your father, that your sister didn't just run off and start a new life in California someplace. When you started looking and really picking through stuff, what kind of things did you find that really convinced you that your father might be responsible for this?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, and I found out so many things throughout the years, but, the first thing was definitely that he took her out of school early that day. He didn't tell anyone. I also found out that he had sold his truck right after Alissa went missing and bought a duplicate vehicle and told no one. None of his children realized that. And then, of course, I found out that he was making her sign contracts stating that she was not sexually abused, that she was not physically abused, basically that everything was fine. I found out that he called Child Protective Services, before Alissa left and said, my daughter's going to call and lie about me and say that I'm sexually abusing her. He called the police and said the same thing, and also asked if they could come arrest her for being bisexual. There's so many things. The police found a receipt from about 3 months before Alissa went missing, in which he bought about 50 pounds of lime and 50 pounds of cement. He also had a storage locker that no one was aware of that, we had. I called our backyard Shed City because we had so many sheds back there, empty ones, half full ones, whatever. So why he needed a storage unit that he told none of his children about was also a big red flag for me. There's so much.
It's Wednesday night after a long day, and the last thing you want to do is cook dinner from scratch. But you still want a satisfying, tasty meal without the guilt? Enter your freezer's sidekick, Cauliflower. From thin and crispy cauliflower crust pizzas to all-natural white meat chicken tenders and crowd-pleasing snacks, Cauliflower satisfies every craving. Cauliflower's products are your favorite comfort foods, but made better for you and gluten-free always. The best part? You don't have to sacrifice taste or time, so you can honor your cravings without compromising. Craving pizza? You can enjoy Cauliflower's delicious margarita pizza for only 370 calories for half the pizza. Looking for easy snacks that kids and adults alike will love? Cauliflower's baked, never-fried pizza snacks are nostalgia reimagined and ready in 5 minutes. Cauliflower's products are available in freezer aisles nationwide. Visit eatcauliflower.com/where-to-buy to find a store near you.
Let's be honest. Most of us have a love-hate relationship with wired bras. We love the lift, but hate the digging. We love the support, but hate feeling trapped. Well, Knix just changed everything with FreeFlex, a wired bra actually designed to work with your body, not against it. FreeFlex features a revolutionary flexible wire that moves when you move, bends when you bend, and keeps everything exactly where you want it. No poking, no stabbing, no constant readjusting, just freedom to move. It also has a demi-cup shape for a natural lift with a lower neckline that flatters in everything from V-necks to dresses. And because it's from Knix, it's available in sizes for every body. Experience the first wired bra you'll actually want to wear all day. Visit Knix.com for 15% off your order with FreeFlex15. That's KNIX.com, code FreeFlex15 for 15% off. Knix.com.
And going back to one of the things you said you found early on, the letter, and you just mentioned the contracts that she signed. Was there any kind of examination to determine if that was her signatures and her writing, if she actually wrote that letter, or if someone, maybe your father, might have forged that letter?
Yes. So the letter was analyzed, and they determined that it was Alyssa's handwriting, but they also determined that it was probably written at 2 different times. And I have emails from the police telling me that they believe that our father forced her to write the letter.
So she could have done it under duress, maybe being threatened or something like that.
Correct. And one important thing I didn't mention when you asked about the evidence was in her note, she states, that's why I saved my money. And she had $1,800 in her bank account that she was saving, and it was never touched. She never took it. And the $300, at the end it says, Dad, I took $300 from you. One of my brothers remembers that incident, and he says it was from weeks before Alissa went missing and that she returned the money.
Yeah, and that seems like a pretty big hole in the story. If she's really running away to California, she's not going to leave $1,800 behind. She's going to take that with her.
Absolutely. I mean, how do you get anywhere with no money, especially being 17 and it being 2001? I mean, you couldn't hire an Uber or, goodness gracious, she didn't even have her cell phone to call a taxi or anything. I think it would be extremely difficult for a 17-year-old to run away and stay away forever with no money.
So when you finally came around years later to suspecting your father was responsible for Alissa's disappearance, the police are also playing catch-up since they didn't investigate heavier early on. What are some of the challenges that you think they're facing trying to catch up after so many years of not investigating?
Yeah, I mean, they did tell me that there was a lot of things they weren't able to obtain because it had been so long. They were trying to get text message logs. They didn't exist anymore. They were trying to go to the school and get the log from, the exact time that she was taken out of school early that day. They couldn't find it. There was no security footage anymore. Of course, witnesses' memories are getting fuzzier and fuzzier every single day. I think probably the biggest challenge was that all of that evidence, the evidence that, they told me they needed for so long, was lost because nobody looked into it.
Eventually, you confronted your father about your suspicions. How did he react when you did confront him?
Yeah. So when he got out of prison, I did confront him in person and I asked him everything, and he was extremely defensive. He was extremely taunting. He said, Sarah, come to my deathbed and I'll give you all the honest answers you want to hear. He also told me that he would agree to confess to everything if the state agreed to give him lethal injection within 10 days of the confession. He was mean. He talked badly about Alissa. He basically said that, we didn't have any type of relationship that would warrant me being this passionate about her. It was extremely upsetting and horrible, and he said very cruel and taunting things.
I know there's an article called 5 Reasons I Know My Father Killed My Sister. Can you summarize those 5 reasons?
Oh my goodness, I would have to go look it back up. If I'm being totally honest with you, I wrote that so long ago. I believe that I pointed to the surveillance being missing, the abuse. This is such a great question. I might have to look it up. I can't remember what I wrote, if I'm being totally honest. I have the worst memory.
And I take it that article is from when you first came to the realization that you fully believe that your father was responsible.
Yeah, I think it was around 2018 that I wrote that. It's just on the blog on justiceforalissa.com, and I was trying to put out all of this reasoning essentially to help just spread the word. So I think I just took whatever I felt was most dynamic at that time, which this is even before I read the case record. I just tried to outline what I could in terms of helping raise exposure for her.
Well, let me ask you this, and this is maybe something that you can't prove, but you'll probably have a good idea of what happened in your gut. Between you and what the police have told you or shared with you, what do you think actually happened between your father and your sister on that day when she went missing, and that led to her going missing?
I think he picked her up out of school early that day. She probably thought something similar was going to happen to what had happened in the past. And by that, I mean her accounts of him taking her out into the middle of the desert, trying to sexually assault her, and then coming back like nothing happened. So I think that's probably what she was anticipating. But I think at this point, he had the note. He had whatever he needed, or I'm sorry, probably made her write the note. This is like, I go back and forth all the time. So I really don't have like a well-rehearsed what I think, because I go back and forth on the note. It is really hard for me. So I think he either had the note that she had possibly written long before she went missing, or he forced her to write the note at that time or add something to it, like the handwriting expert alluded to, that it was written at different times. But yeah, I think he just, in some capacity sexually abused her and murdered her. It's hard. It's not something I love to think about, or something I've honestly spent a lot of time thinking about. Just because it's so horrible and so graphic. And to be honest, there's countless ways he could have done it. Arizona is a vast desert that he was extremely familiar with. This man had no job, meaning that he had a lot of time to plan this. He is ex-law enforcement, so he's aware of the laws, and he's aware of, how these crimes have happened in the past. So it's hard, because I think the possibilities are really infinite.
And just touching on that a little bit, have the police had any credible evidence or clues that have led them to search any specific areas or pinpoint any certain areas where they should be looking?
So there are a variety of areas that are mentioned in their case documents. The police even went on ABC 2020 and said that they would like to search in Desert Center, California, which is where my father states in the manifesto that the two assassins from the Union buried Alissa. So it's my understanding from police testimony that that is kind of their top pick. But there are so many witnesses that say that he could have disposed of her at a family property up north that he was very familiar with. There's also a patch of desert not too far from our house that he was familiar with, that was being annexed after Alissa was gone. I think it was like 5 years after she was gone. So the city was annexing it, apparently planning to build something on it. And he made dozens of phone calls about this piece of land. He wanted to know what was going on it, what was happening with it. And in addition to that, there's a video of him going out at night exploring this area, like with a flashlight. It's very eerie. There's nothing else to it. It's just him exploring it. So there's a variety of different areas. But when I asked the police if they would search Desert Center, California, they said no.
Wow. And officially, I guess she's still classified as a missing person, but you believe that she died the day that she went missing.
At a certain point in the case record, it does turn from missing person to, I believe, suspected homicide. So that classification has been changed. But yeah, I would expect that she died the day that she went missing. I think that holding her somewhere, or I just think all of that is so risky. And as much as I don't like my father, he is an extremely intelligent man who, spent a lot of his time doing bad things like making bombs. And, he has a long history of sexual abuse and sexually abusing women in the desert. And just, it's so hard. I just think that he is so smart that it wouldn't make sense for him to keep her anywhere, but I could be totally wrong.
Do you think that there's any possibility that he could have had any help along the way from anyone?
I do. I think that it is possible. It's hard to say because I'm not trying to name that person. But yeah, I think it's extremely possible.
And obviously that would make someone else responsible to some degree. Hopefully they would have a conscience or be worried about jail time themselves, that they would want to cooperate and provide answers if that's the case.
That would be my hope, yeah, that if they really were involved, that they will speak up and, basically roll on my father and tell the truth.
Well, and I know the Phoenix PD said that they were submitting the case to the prosecutor's office in early 2019 for charges against your father. You just announced that recently on your podcast, I think last month, if I'm not mistaken. What is the status of that matter now? Have you been in contact with the DA at all?
So that is a very long and sordid story. But yeah, essentially, the police tell me they aren't going to prosecute. They tell me to get media. I get media. I go back to them in January of 2019. They tell me they're not going to do anything. They're not going to help me. They can't do anything. It's probably the most horrendous audio I have on my podcast, at least from the feedback I'm getting. People are saying it's literally worse than my conversation with my father. They're just, not kind to me. And I leave that meeting saying, you know what, good luck. You'll have to explain this to Netflix. And a week later, I get an email saying, we're going to go ahead and present this case for prosecution. I contact the county attorney's office to confirm. They say, yep, I can confirm. You'll probably know in about 2 weeks. Call back after 2 weeks. They say, you know what, give us another 2 weeks. And 18 months later, there was still nothing. And essentially, what happened was NBC News contacted the police, and I had tried to stop them from releasing this information to the media before. They tried to release it in 2019, and I went to that media source and I begged them. I said, listen, if my father hurts himself, this case is gone forever. Alyssa's case is just gone. I said, you can't do this, please. I begged them, and they decided not to run with the story, thank goodness. And I begged the police. I said, please don't run this story. It is extremely dangerous. If my father is, contriving some type of plan, this is when he's going to follow through with it. If he's going to kill himself or kill others, this is when he's going to do it, is when he thinks he's going to be arrested. But then, last month I get an email and they said, we've released the information to NBC News. So I went on my podcast and I announced that in 2019, they sent me that email and they said that they were going to move forward with prosecution.
Are they still planning to now at this point? Is that the latest that they are going to do that?
Yeah, so essentially about 2 weeks ago, the police did finally finish everything, providing everything to the state that they had requested. It took them 18 months to get everything to the state, and now it is in the state's hands. So, that's, like I said, I feel like it's like a marathon, and this is the last leg of it to push for this media that the police told me to get. But it's in the state's hands now, and hopefully they decide to go forward with it.
And hopefully they get some answers and uncover some stuff to help solve the case or get him to own up to what he did and spill the truth once and for all. Where did your podcast go once you decided, I'm going to have a podcast, I'm going to talk about this case? What things did you decide to go through in your podcast and focus on? I know you do a lot of stuff. I know in one episode you're talking about this bizarre VHS tape collection. I know you've talked about the surveillance and everything. How do you pick and choose which things to focus on in your podcast?
Yeah, I mean, it was not easy, and I definitely did it episode by episode. As much as I wish I could come on here and say I had a grand master plan for all the episodes, I really didn't. It was about 6 months in after they told me they were going to present this for prosecution, and there was no movement. And I was like, I have to do something. I have to do something big that they're going to notice. So I was like, I'll start a podcast. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I essentially just requested all of the records from them. I had never done that before. I thought I knew everything about this case from other people researching it. And I got those 3,000 plus pages and read them in about 6 weeks. And I realized I knew nothing about this case, absolutely nothing. But what I did while I was going through the documents is I made myself a timeline, I have a timeline that is 174 pages long. And that comes 99% from that case record. So I would take things like, okay, they found a receipt for lime and concrete and put the date in, and then I can correlate it with other incidents that are happening. So it was really hard. I kind of labeled things in green that I knew that I really, really wanted in the podcast. And then I coupled that with, I have like 50 plus home videos here. So I went through all of that too. I watched every home video trying to get real audio of Alissa that people could hear. And then I started conducting my own interviews. I interviewed every single person that ever knew Alissa that would talk to me. And I just started formulating it from there. And so the first episode is essentially, it starts in modern day. It's me right after CrimeCon 2019 calling my father, asking if he would go back on 2020 with me. And then I kind of start from the beginning and go forward. So yeah, I just knew I wanted to do it in chronological order. I had this 174 page timeline guiding me with things highlighted. And I just built each episode from there. And then I used audio from the home videos and audio from my interviews with people to help supplement that.
I don't think a lot of people, or maybe they do, a lot of them that listen to your show already know, but anyone that's not overly familiar with Alissa's case don't realize how many puzzle pieces and layers there are to the case, and how many things you've had to go through, what you've discovered. And you talk about all of that on Voices for Justice. So there's no lack there, unfortunately, of material, because it's just so big a case. So I encourage anyone that can, obviously we can't cover everything in an hour here on Missing Persons, but anyone that really wants an in-depth examination of the case definitely should go over to Sarah's podcast and listen to it and start with the first episode. And we'll play a preview of Voices for Justice at the end of the show. What is in store for you next? What are your next steps in getting attention for the case and trying to have a resolution?
Yeah, so the official timeline of the podcast has ended. 24 episodes of timeline from 1948 until 2019. But I am bringing on some experts to talk about what they think about the case, because I'm not super interested in putting my opinion out there, to be totally honest. The podcast is very little of my commentary. It's very much just case record. So I want to bring on experts in their field. I'm bringing on, a retired detective, a psychiatrist, as many experts as I can to get their professional opinion on the case. And I hope that just continues to draw awareness. But I've also, just plugging away in social media, I started a TikTok 2 months ago and it has blown up. I have like 33 million views in the last week. So I think I'm going to go forward with that and keep trying to get attention and just try to, like I said, finish this last leg of this media marathon really, really strong, just to show them that, we're not going away and a lot of people care. I just had a billboard put up. I'm really trying to do everything I can to make this as big as possible in hopes of getting her justice.
Well, good for you. I'm sure that Alissa would be proud of you, and I want to applaud you just for being such a great advocate for your sister. I really appreciate you coming on to discuss her case with us, and hopefully you get the answers you've been waiting for a long time.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for having me on and being a part of fighting for her.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Missing Persons. If you can provide any information to help solve the case we discussed in this episode, we hope that you'll contact the appropriate authorities.
We hope that you'll tell your friends about Missing Persons and invite them to listen to the show. Word of mouth will really help us grow. And if you'd like to help us reach new listeners, please be sure to rate and review Missing Persons on the platform you're listening to us now on.
We'd like to tell you a little bit about our Patreon program. If you visit patreon.com/missingpodcast, you can sign up to help this podcast through ongoing monthly support. As a thank you, we'll give you an on-air shout-out, a thank you card and sticker, plus you'll get ad-free early access to every new episode of Missing Persons, as well as any bonus content.
Your Patreon support also goes directly towards helping the missing, because every dollar that we earn through Patreon will be split with two worthwhile causes that benefit the efforts to bring missing people home: CharlieProject.org and Private Investigations for the Missing. Your Patreon support will really go a long way towards helping. We hope you'll consider supporting the show. Just a reminder, new episodes of Missing Persons drop every other Saturday. If you want to find us on social media, you can search Facebook for Missing Persons Podcast. We're also on Twitter with the handle @missing_pod. And of course, you can always find us on our website, missingpersonspodcast.net. On behalf of Jess Betancourt, this is Mike Morford saying thanks, and we'll see you next time on Missing Persons.
Missing Persons is produced under the name AbJack Entertainment by Mike Morford and Jessica Betancourt. It's hosted by Mike Morford and Jessica Betancourt, with writing and research by Jessica Betancourt and editing by Mike Morford. Be sure to listen every other Saturday for an all-new episode of Missing Persons.
My missing persons case is 17-year-old Alissa Marie Turney.
Alissa Turney.
Alissa Turney.
Alissa Turney.
On this episode, we're going to tackle a mystery out of Phoenix, Arizona, with a lot of disturbing twists and turns. 17-year-old Alissa Turney vanished.
Alissa Turney.
Alissa Turney. Alyssa Marie Turney.
Disappearance of Alissa Turney.
And today's a really exciting episode because we are talking about the case of Alissa Turney.
Okay, so today we are doing Alissa Turney.
Alissa Turney.
Alissa Turney.
Alyssa Marie Turney was a 17-year-old from Phoenix, Arizona.
And someone reached out to me there and said, would you please cover the story of my missing sister? And ever since, I have essentially been in contact, I think daily, with Sarah. Her name is Sarah Turney, and her sister is Alyssa.
But do the clues to Alyssa's disappearance point much closer to home?
Mike was watching his own children through a video camera.
Alyssa had told him very graphic things, very disturbing things.
Secret home movies, a warehouse packed with evidence, and a cold case that turns hot.
Again, there's only two people that can confirm whether I did it. One is me, and the other is Alyssa.
A family torn apart.
My name is Sarah Turney, and you might have heard of my sister Alyssa's story before.
Be there at the deathbed, Sarah, and I'll give you all the honest answers you want to hear.
Why don't you give them to me now?
Because you got them now.
But I promise that you've never heard it like this. On Voices for Justice, I'm going to dive deep into Alyssa's case like never before.
Dad! Dad's a pervert!
I'm going to interview people you've never heard from, and I'm going to expose more about the police, my family, and myself than ever before.
I'm not asking you to move forward on it. I'm asking you to acknowledge that he wasn't briefed on the case, which you're not going to do, and I understand, but he wasn't. He said that he was aware that there were no sexual allegations, which is completely crazy to me because there's over 25 people in your documents that allege this. So when he says that, I don't know what he's talking about.
I've held back a lot for a long time, and I'm ready to release it on my own terms. The police told me that my best chance is media exposure, and I've been working for years to amplify my voice through others. But now, I'm ready to make some noise. Subscribe to Voices for Justice today on iTunes and most podcast players.
Allegations, as you say, were people saying Alyssa said something had happened. He tried something, but there weren't any specific acts.
Alyssa had told him very graphic things, very disturbing things.
So that may have been what Sergeant Corson was referring to. There were no specific acts that anybody was aware of. Okay.
Whatever you'd like to say, I'm not going to go round and round. It's all email is public record, and I'm happy with that.